Chapter 3. A Visitor in the Storm. I entered the house and closed the door behind me. I hung the lantern on a hook near the door. The flame inside of it had gone out and needed to be rekindled. I had just been in the rain for a few minutes, and my clothes were completely soaked into water. Water trickled from all of my clothes. My mother had left plenty of dry clothes for me in the cupboard, so I took off my boots and walked slowly to the cupboard. My bare feet made a slap-slap sound on the wooden floor. I opened the cupboard, rummaged about in it, and found a pair of fresh clothes. I put them on, closed the cupboard, and went into the kitchen. I grabbed a glass and poured some water into it from a jug. I then gulped all the water down in one go. I felt relieved to have my thirst quenched. The house had been plunged into the darkness. Only some faint light flickered from the fire that was burning in the fireplace. On the ground floor, 2 lanterns hung, one near the front door and the other in the kitchen. So I went near each and lit it. The lanterns bathed the living room and the kitchen with golden light. The lanterns had enough fuel in them to last for 3 nights without a problem. The storm was raging outside. A heavy torrent of rain was drumming loudly on the roof. It was accompanied by thunder and lightning. The wind played its part too and made the whining sound of a banshee. The whole atmosphere felt like hell had broken loose. My stomach made a sound, and I became aware of my hunger. With my body starving, I went into the kitchen, served some meal on a plate from the pot, and settled myself down on a chair at the dining table. I said my prayers and started wolfing down the warm food my mother had prepared. I tried not to think of the events I had gone through while eating, or else they would make me choke on my food. After finishing my meal, I washed my plate, wiped it with a dry piece of cloth, and put it in its place. It was cold outside, but the fire inside of the hearth kept the inner temperature of the house warm. My father had told me to add more pieces of wood to the hearth. They were stored in the cellar. The wood in the fireplace looked close to turning completely into an ember, so I decided to go down to the cellar and fetch some. I have said that I didn't like to go down the cellar alone, but I had no choice. My father was not there to accompany me, and I needed more wood in the hearth to keep the temperature tolerable. So, telling myself to be brave, I unhooked the lantern from the hook in the kitchen and headed to the back door. I opened it, went through it, and closed it quickly behind me to avoid the rainwater from getting into the house. I hadn't bothered to put on my boots. The back door had a porch that protected me from the direct onslaught of rain. Outside, the sound of the storm was so loud that I wouldn't be able to hear my scream. Slowly, I moved to the opening of the cellar. I then bent down and opened the doors, which lay closed. The doors usually made a loud creaking sound when opened, but this time the sound was muffled by the storm. With a lantern in my hand, I started to descend the stairs. I reached the bottom of the stairs and looked around. The air was tainted with the stench of something dead. Probably a rat has died in here, I thought. The ground was barren with soil. Cobwebs had formed everywhere, not to mention the 8-legged creatures dwelling inside them. I saw the pile of wood pieces stored in a far corner, so I moved towards it. The light cast by my lantern made shadows of cobwebs and their dwellers all around the walls of the cellar. I picked up a few pieces of wood from the pile and turned to leave the cellar. This place always gave me the creeps. "Sooner I am out of here the better," I said. I was on my way to the stairs when I saw something, a sign of a pentagon. It was carved on one of the walls in the portion near the ground. Who has carved it here? I wondered. I touched it and felt the depression it had made in the wall. It was as big as the size of my palm. Thunder boomed above, and with that, I got up and decided to leave. When I had come out of the cellar, I shut down both doors of the opening in the ground and entered the house. I hooked the lantern back to its place, went near the hearth, and placed the pieces of wood on the floor. I saw that the wood inside the hearth had completely turned into ash. So I used one big piece of wood, saving the rest of the night, and threw it inside the fireplace. I sprayed some kerosene atop, used a matchstick, and brought the hearth to life again. I felt comfy as the air inside the living room slowly became warmer. Then I settled myself on a chair in front of the hearth. For a few minutes, I warmed my bones before the fire. I then started assessing the events that had taken place recently. First, my mind went over the plant. I had not seen such a peculiarity of vegetation. What yellowish substance had it emitted when I had touched it? Could it have been poison? If it had been poison, then why was I not feeling any effects of it now? Then I thought of the creature that looked partly a rabbit, partly a bat, and partly a wolf. It had looked very threatening when it had jumped in front of me, and I was sure it would devour me, but then it had spoken a warning and flown away. "You are doomed," it had said. What had it meant? And above all, how could an animal speak? Why had I frozen on the spot and couldn't move my body for a moment? For a long time, I brooded over those questions while sitting in the chair, that would continue to make the soothing sound of cracking in the fireplace and fill the air with warmth. Then suddenly my mind struck on an explanation that would explain everything. It must have been the plant all along. The yellow substance that I had inhaled must have sent me through a series of hallucinatory effects. It must have acted the same way the wine did upon overindulgence. With that thought, every piece of the puzzle started to fall in its place. That weird creature, those bloody eyes, and its warning. All of it was a part of my hallucination. With that, I took a breath of relief. Now, the question was, how long until the effects would wear off? Had it worn off already, or would it take some time? With the mystery solved, my eyelids started to become heavier over time. Soon, I drifted to sleep. I was awakened suddenly by a loud sound. It was rapping on the front door. I saw that it was a few hours past dusk. The storm had not lessened a bit. Who could it be at this time? I asked myself. I sluggishly got up from the chair and made my way to the front door. By the time I reached the door, the rapping had become louder and more frequent. I decided to have a look through the peephole before opening the door. The hole was at a bit of height, fashioned for adults, so I stood on my toes and looked through it awkwardly. Outside, it was very dark, but the occasional light cast by the lightning helped me to make out the features of the person who was standing behind the door. It was a tall man with broad shoulders. I couldn't observe his face because it was covered in the shadow of the hood he wore on his head. "Who are you and what do you want?" I called out from behind the door, but no answer came from beyond. I yelled louder and asked again, but there was no answer. Only the rapping continued. So, without wasting my breath anymore, I unhooked the lantern, which hung near the wall, held it in my hand, and unlocked the locking mechanisms, which held the door locked. No sooner had I unlocked the door than it swung open, driven by the force of the stormy wind. My face had barely missed getting knocked by the swinging door. It would have been a nasty accident, I thought to myself. I was now face to face with a man. He wore a black coat up to his ankle, a pair of leather trousers to his torso, and boots to his feet. He was holding a canvas sack over his shoulder. I didn't know what was inside. I held the lantern high so that we could see each other, just like the backyard door. The front door had a porch, too, which protected a man from the direct onslaught of rain. He coughed and spoke in a low, rumbling voice. "Saint, I have not eaten for days. I would be very grateful if you had any food to spare." My mother had strictly instructed me not to let any stranger inside the house. But this man looked miserable. I had plenty of food to spare. I could help him. "Wait here while I get you something," I said. The man nodded and obeyed. After leaving the visitor at the door, I went into the kitchen. I picked up 2 bowls. In one, I poured some vegetable soup, and in the other, I served some rice. I carefully carried both of the bowls to the door, trying not to spill any of the food. Steam rose from the bowls and touched my face, suggesting the food was still warm inside them. When I reached the door, I saw no sign of the man. Had he gone? I tried to call for him. "Mister, hey, I have brought some food for you." But there was no answer. I stood there for a few minutes in the hope that he would return, but it was futile. He never showed up. I closed the door, locked it, and went to the kitchen. I placed the bowls on the dining table and covered the openings with lids. Maybe he will return later. I will give him then, I thought. Then I added another piece of wood to the hearth and watched as the wood picked up the flame and started cracking. I thought of getting a book from my room upstairs. When I had reached the top of the stairs, I observed that the floor was covered in utter darkness. I couldn't see my own body in there. 2 lanterns lay on the first floor. One hung on the wall of the corridor, and the other in my room. I found my way in the dark to the lantern in the corridor. After some struggle, I reached it. I had kept the matchbox with me, so I lit the lantern in a moment and got rid of the darkness. I then entered my room and did the same with the lantern that lay in there. All of the lanterns of the house were kindled now, and I decided to keep them lit until dawn. Many books lay there on the table in my room. I searched through them, deciding which one to read. All of them shared the same genre, horror. After taking some time, I picked one up and was on my way downstairs. When I was on the threshold of the door, I stopped, turned back, and looked at the window of my room. The window was open, and its wooden boards were smashing against the frame, driven by the violent wind. I quickly reached there and tried to grab hold of the boards. Before closing them, I stared for a moment outside. The frequent lightning illuminated everything outside. There, in one of the flashes, I saw a silhouette of somebody in the graveyard field. The second flash revealed the silhouette to be of a man. He seemed to be holding something over his shoulder, and, with a third flash, he was gone. I stood there and thought, was he the man who was on the door moments ago? I asked myself, what was he doing in the graveyard, and how did he manage to vanish like that? I must be imagining, aided by the lightning, playing tricks on me. I said to myself and dismissed it. I closed the window and, leaving the door ajar, moved downstairs.